Richard Walker hits the pavement hard. The concrete is cold. The sky spins. Pain blooms in his chest like fire under pressure. His mouth opens, but no sound comes. People walk past. No one notices. Not the man in the tailored suit gasping for air. Not until hands, firm, steady, pressing against his ribs in rhythm. Someone's counting, calling for help. His vision fades in and out, and then he sees her face, Margaret Green, the janitor he fired last week, the woman he humiliated in front of 30 employees for being 5 minutes late. And now, she's kneeling over him, pumping his chest, her voice sharp and steady as she keeps him alive. Take a moment to reflect on second chances. If this story touches you, please subscribe and share your thoughts below.
1 week earlier, Richard Walker owns everything that matters in Millbrook. Walker Industries employs half the town, and his name sits on the hospital wing, the library, and the youth center. At 52, he's built an empire that would make his late father proud. But success has made him cold. He walks through the corporate headquarters like a king, surveying his kingdom. Employees scatter when they see him coming. He doesn't know their names, doesn't care about their stories. Numbers matter. Productivity matters. Everything else is weakness. Margaret Green arrives at 7:05 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. She's been the night janitor for 3 years, working quietly in the shadows while the executives sleep. At 64, she still scrubs floors with the same thoroughness she brought to everything else. Her arthritis makes her slower now, but she's never missed a day. This morning, her bus broke down 6 blocks from the building. She walked the rest of the way, her cleaning supplies heavy in her arms. 5 minutes late. 5 minutes that will cost her everything. Richard happens to be in the lobby when she enters. He's showing the new board members around, pointing out the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. His voice carries across the empty space. This is how we maintain excellence. Attention to detail, no exceptions. That's when Margaret slipped through the service entrance, checking her watch with worry. Her shoulders are hunched from the cold October morning. She moves toward the elevator bank, hoping to disappear into her work. "Excuse me," Richard calls out. His voice echoes off the marble walls. Margaret stops. She turns slowly, her weathered face showing the exhaustion of someone who's been working 2 jobs to pay rent on a 1-bedroom apartment. "You're late," Richard says. The board members watch with interest. This is their first glimpse of how Richard Walker handles problems. "I'm sorry, Mr. Walker. The bus broke down and I don't want excuses." His voice is sharp, professional. "This is a business, not a charity. If you can't arrive on time, we'll find someone who can." Margaret's face doesn't change. She's heard this tone before, from other bosses, other men who saw her as disposable. But something flickers in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or disappointment. "I understand," she says quietly. "Good. Clean out your locker. Security will escort you out." The board members nod approvingly. This is decisive leadership. This is how successful companies operate. But as Margaret walks toward the elevator, she pauses and looks back at Richard. For just a moment, her expression softens. She sees something in his face that makes her shake her head slightly, as if she's remembering a different person entirely. "You look just like your father, but you're nothing like him." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. He hasn't thought about his father in years, hasn't wanted to. Thomas Walker was too soft, too generous, too willing to put people before profits. That's why Richard had to rebuild everything after his father's death. But Margaret's words bring back memories he's tried to bury. Summer afternoons when Margaret would bring him lemonade while he played in the company garden. The way she'd listened to his problems when his parents were fighting. How she'd stayed late after his mother's funeral, cleaning up while the family grieved. Margaret was there for everything. She was family. And he just fired her for being 5 minutes late. The elevator doors close, and Margaret disappears from view. Richard turns back to the board members, forcing his professional smile back into place. Business continues. The tour resumes. But something has shifted in the marble lobby. Something he can't quite name. That evening, Richard drives past Margaret's apartment building. He doesn't know why. He tells himself it's coincidence that he's just taking a different route home. But he slows down when he sees her walking to the bus stop, her shoulders bent under the weight of a cardboard box. She looks smaller somehow, older, defeated. He could stop. He could roll down the window and offer her a ride. He could apologize, give her the job back, pretend this morning never happened. But instead, he drives past without stopping. But in his rearview mirror, he watches Margaret sit down on the bench and cover her face with her hands. For just a moment, her shoulders shake. Then she straightens up, checks the bus schedule, and waits with the same quiet dignity she's always carried. Richard tells himself he made the right choice. This is business. This is how leaders lead. But that night, he dreams of lemonade and garden sprinklers, and a woman who knew him before he became someone worth knowing.
The next morning, Richard finds an envelope on his desk. No return address, just his name written in careful script. Inside is a single photograph. Him at age 8, grinning gap-toothed beside a woman in a floral dress. Margaret. They're standing in front of his father's office, her arm around his shoulders like he's her own child. He remembers that day. His father was in meetings, and Margaret had volunteered to watch him. She'd taught him to make paper airplanes and told him stories about her own childhood. She'd made him feel important, listened to, loved. On the back of the photo, Margaret has written, "For little Richie, who used to dream of changing the world." Margaret, 1978. Richard stares at the photo for a long time. He'd forgotten about those dreams, forgotten about the boy who wanted to build hospitals and help people. Success had taught him that dreams were luxuries, that kindness was weakness. But holding this photograph, he remembers who he used to be. His secretary buzzes in. "Mr. Walker, there's a woman here to see you. Says it's personal." Richard quickly slides the photo into his desk drawer. "Send her in." Margaret enters his office quietly, her hands folded in front of her. She's wearing her best dress, the navy blue one she saves for church and special occasions. Her grey hair is neatly arranged, and she carries herself with the same dignity she's always had. But Richard can see the cost of yesterday's firing, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she holds her purse a little too tightly, the careful way she speaks, as if she's afraid of saying the wrong thing. "I came to return this," she says, placing something on his desk. It's a small silver frame, the kind that holds a family photo. Inside is a picture of Thomas Walker, Richard's father, standing with his arm around Margaret at the Christmas party. "Your father gave this to me when I got promoted to head of housekeeping," Margaret explains. "I was part of the Walker family. I kept it on my desk for 15 years. Richard stares at the photo. His father looks young, maybe 40, his eyes bright with the kind of optimism Richard has never possessed. Margaret looks younger too, but her smile is the same. Warm, genuine, unguarded. "I don't want your pity," Margaret continues. "I came to tell you that I found another job. Night shift at the hospital. The pay is less, but they don't mind if the bus runs late. Her words are calm, measured, but Richard can hear the hurt underneath. She's not here for an apology. She's here to show him that she survived his cruelty, that she's stronger than he thought. Margaret, Let me finish. Her voice is gentle but firm. I knew your father for 15 years. He was a good man, a kind man. He taught you to ride a bike in the parking lot after work. He brought you to the office on weekends so you wouldn't be alone while your mother was sick. Richard's chest tightens. He'd forgotten about those weekends, forgotten how his father had made the office feel like an adventure instead of a burden. He used to tell me that you were going to be different, that you were going to change the world. He said you had his heart, but your mother's strength. He was so proud of you. The words hit Richard like arrows. Each one lands in a place he thought he'd closed off years ago. But the man who fired me yesterday, Margaret's voice remains steady, but her eyes are bright with unshed tears. That's not Thomas Walker's son. That's someone entirely entire. She turns to leave, then pauses at the door. I'm not angry with you, Richard. I'm just sad. Your father would be heartbroken to see what you've become. The door closes with a soft click, and Richard is alone with his father's photograph and the weight of Margaret's words. He tries to go back to work, to lose himself in quarterly reports and board meetings, but everything feels different now. He looks around his office and sees it through Margaret's eyes, the expensive furniture, the awards on the walls, the view of the city he controls. None of it feels like success anymore. It feels like a prison he's built around himself. That afternoon, Richard cancels his meetings and drives to his father's grave. He hasn't been there in 5 years, maybe longer. The headstone is simple. Thomas Walker, beloved father and friend. Richard sits on the grass and pulls out the photograph Margaret returned. His father's face seems to look right through him, seeing past the expensive suit and the cold demeanor to the frightened boy underneath. I'm sorry, Dad, Richard whispers. I forgot who I was supposed to be, but apologies to the dead don't change anything. Margaret is still working the night shift at the hospital, and Richard is still the man who fires people for being 5 minutes late.
Richard spends the next 3 days trying to find Margaret. He drives past the hospital during shift changes, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. He calls the main number, but they won't give out employee information. He even considers waiting in the parking lot, but something stops him. What would he say? What right does he have to her time now? Meanwhile, Margaret moves through her new routine with quiet determination. The hospital night shift is harder than office cleaning. There are emergencies, chaos, the constant hum of machines keeping people alive. But she doesn't complain. She never has. On Thursday night, Richard makes a decision. He drives to the hospital and walks into the main lobby. The receptionist looks up with tired eyes. I'm looking for Margaret Green. She works the night shift. Are you family? Richard pauses. What is he? Former employer? Childhood friend? The man who destroyed her life over 5 minutes? I'm someone who needs to apologize. The receptionist studies his face. Something in his expression must convince her because she points toward the elevators. 3rd floor, East Wing. But she's working. Don't cause trouble. Richard takes the elevator to the 3rd floor and walks the long hallway until he sees her. Margaret is mopping the floor outside the cardiac unit, her movements slow and methodical. She wears simple scrubs now instead of her cleaning uniform, but she carries herself with the same dignity. He watches her for a moment, remembering all the times she'd cleaned his childhood messes without complaint. Spilled juice, broken toys, the mess he'd made when he was 8 and tried to cook breakfast for his sick mother. She'd always been there, cleaning up after him. Margaret. She looks up, and for a moment, surprise flickers across her face. Then she returns to mopping the floor, her movements steady and controlled. "Mr. Walker, this is a surprise. I've been looking for you. I'm working." She doesn't look at him again. "This isn't the time or place. I need to talk to you." "No." The word is quiet, but firm. "You don't get to decide when we talk anymore. You made your choice." Richard feels something crack inside his chest. He'd expected anger, maybe tears, but this calm dismissal is worse than any tantrum. Margaret has moved on. She's found a way to live without him, without his approval, without his money. "I was wrong," he says desperately. "I was wrong to fire you. I was wrong to treat you like that. I was wrong about everything." Margaret stops mopping and looks at him directly for the first time. Her eyes are tired but clear. "Yes, you were wrong," she says simply. The acknowledgement should feel like forgiveness, but it doesn't. It feels like a door closing. "I want to make it right. I want to give you your job back. Better pay, better hours, whatever you need." "I don't need anything from you." The words are spoken without malice, but they cut deeper than any insult. Margaret isn't angry. She's not hurt. She's simply done with him. "My father loved you," Richard says, his voice cracking. "He always said you were family." Margaret's expression softens slightly. "Your father was a good man, but he's gone, Richard. And the little boy I used to take care of is gone too." She picks up her mop bucket and starts to walk away. Richard follows, desperate to keep the conversation going. "I remember the lemonade, summer afternoons in the garden. You taught me to make paper boats. You stayed late after Mom's funeral to help clean up." Margaret stops walking. For a moment, her shoulders sag slightly. "I remember too," she says quietly. "But that was a long time ago." "It doesn't have to be," Richard says. "I can change. I can be better." Margaret turns around slowly. Her eyes are bright with unshed tears, but her voice remains steady. "Some things can't be fixed with money, Richard. Some things can't be undone." She walks away, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Richard stands there watching until she disappears around the corner. Then he sits down in one of the plastic chairs outside the cardiac unit and puts his head in his hands. For the first time in 20 years, Richard Walker cries. He cries for the boy who used to dream of changing the world. He cries for the father he disappointed. He cries for the woman who loved him like a son and who he repaid with cruelty. But most of all, he cries because Margaret is right. Some things can't be fixed. Some damage can't be undone. And some people, no matter how much you need their forgiveness, have the right to walk away. A nurse passing by stops and asks if he's okay. Richard wipes his eyes and nods, but they both know he's lying. He's not okay. He may never be okay again. And Margaret Green, the woman who once bandaged his scraped knees and dried his tears, is no longer there to help him heal. Richard doesn't sleep that night. He sits in his study, surrounded by the trappings of success, and thinks about Margaret's words. Some things can't be fixed with money. The phrase echoes in his mind like a prayer or a curse. He pulls out his phone and calls his lawyer. "I need you to set up a trust fund," he says. "Anonymous. For Margaret Green. Enough to cover her rent, groceries, medical expenses, whatever she needs." "How much are we talking about?" "Whatever it takes." But even as he makes the arrangements, Richard knows it's not enough. Money was never what Margaret needed from him. She needed kindness, respect, the recognition that her life mattered. She needed him to remember who he used to be. The next morning, Richard drives to his father's old house. He hasn't been there since the funeral, has been paying a service to maintain it while he decided what to do with the property. The key still works, and the house still smells like his childhood. Furniture covered in white sheets, family photos on the mantel, his father's reading glasses still on the kitchen table. In his father's study, Richard finds what he's looking for. A box marked Margaret in his father's handwriting. Inside are Christmas cards, thank you notes, and small gifts she'd given the family over the years. A hand-knitted scarf, a coffee mug with "World's Best Boss" painted on the side, a photo of Richard's 8th birthday party where Margaret had insisted on making the cake herself. At the bottom of the box is a letter in his father's handwriting, dated just a month before he died. Margaret has been with our family for 15 years. She's not just an employee, she's part of our story. When I'm gone, I hope Richard remembers that success isn't measured in profits, but in the lives we touch. Margaret taught me that. I hope she can teach him too. Richard reads the letter 3 times, his father's words burning into his memory. He'd been so focused on building an empire that he'd forgotten to build a life. That afternoon, Richard shows up at the hospital again. This time, he doesn't ask for Margaret. He walks to the 3rd floor and waits in the hallway until she appears. He says, "I brought you something," holding out the box. Margaret looks at it suspiciously. "I don't want your money. It's not money. It's from my father's house. Things that belonged to you." She takes the box reluctantly and opens it. When she sees the contents, her expression changes. The coffee mug makes her smile slightly. The photo of Richard's birthday party makes her eyes bright. "He kept all of this?" she asks. "He loved you, Margaret. You weren't just an employee to him. You were family." Margaret closes the box carefully and says, "Your father was a good man, but that doesn't change what happened between us. I know. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me try to be better." "Why?" The question catches Richard off guard. Why does he care so much about Margaret's opinion? Why does her approval matter more than board meetings and quarterly reports? "Because you're the only person who knew me before I became this," he says finally. "You're the only person who remembers who I was supposed to be." Margaret studies his face for a long moment. That little boy is still in there somewhere, but he's buried under 20 years of anger and ambition. "I can't dig him out for you, Richard. That's work you have to do yourself. Help me," Richard says. "Please. I don't know how to be better." "It's not about being better. It's about being human. Your father understood that. He knew that the people who worked for him had lives, families, struggles. He treated them with dignity. I want to try." Margaret sets the box down and looks at him directly. "Then start small. Learn your employees' names. Ask about their families. Remember that they're people, not just numbers on a spreadsheet." Richard nods eagerly. "I can do that. I will do that." "Maybe," Margaret says quietly. "But it's going to take more than a conversation to change 20 years of habits." She picks up the box and starts to walk away. Richard follows, desperate to keep the connection alive. He says, "Will you give me a chance? Will you let me prove that I can change?" Margaret stops and turns around. For a moment, Her expression is soft, almost maternal. It's the same look she used to give him when he was a child and had promised to be good. She says, "I'll be watching, but from a distance. You hurt me, Richard. You humiliated me, and I'm too old to pretend that doesn't matter." She walks away, leaving Richard standing in the hospital hallway with more hope than he's felt in years. It's not forgiveness, but it's not rejection either. It's a chance, and maybe, if he's very careful and very lucky, it might be enough.
6 months later, Richard Walker is a different man. Not completely transformed, but changed in ways that matter. He knows the names of his employees now. He asks about their families, their struggles, their dreams. He's instituted paid sick leave and flexible scheduling. The corporate culture at Walker Industries has softened, become more human. But the change that matters most is invisible. Richard sleeps better now. He looks at himself in the mirror and sees echoes of his father. The boy who wanted to change the world is still buried deep, but he's stirring, slowly coming back to life. Margaret still works the night shift at the hospital. Richard has driven by a few times, but he's never stopped. He respects her need for distance, even though it costs him. Sometimes he sees her at the grocery store or the bank, and they nod politely to each other. She's still cautious, still guarded, but the sharp edge of hurt has softened into something more like sadness. On a rainy Tuesday evening, Richard's chest begins to tighten. He's working late, reviewing reports in his empty office, when the pain hits like a freight train. His left arm goes numb, his vision blurs. He manages to call 911 before collapsing behind his desk. The paramedics find him unconscious and rush him to the hospital. Heart attack. Massive. The kind that kills men his age who work too hard and love too little. When Richard wakes up 3 days later, the first face he sees is Margaret's. She's checking his IV. Her movements professional and gentle. She doesn't speak, doesn't acknowledge that he's awake. She simply does her job with the same quiet dignity she's always carried. "Margaret," he whispers. She continues checking his chart. "How are you feeling, Mr. Walker?" The formal address hurts more than the chest pain, but Richard understands. At the hospital, she's a professional. He's a patient. The past stays in the past. "I'm better," he says. "Thank you." She nods and starts to leave. Richard reaches out weakly, his fingers brushing her wrist. "Wait," he says. "Please." Margaret stops but doesn't turn around. "You need to rest. I need to tell you something." She turns slowly, her expression neutral. "What?" "I remember everything now. The lemonade, the paper boats, the way you held me when Mom died, the way you made me feel like I mattered." Margaret's composure wavers slightly. "You're on pain medication, Mr. Walker. You should rest. I fired you for being 5 minutes late, but you saved my life. You could have walked past when you found me in the parking lot. You could have let someone else call 911, but you didn't." "I'm a nurse," Margaret says simply. "It's what I do." "No," Richard says. "It's who you are. You save people. You take care of people. You love people who don't deserve it." Margaret's eyes fill with tears, but she doesn't let them fall. "You're going to be fine, Mr. Walker. The doctor says you can go home tomorrow. I don't want to go home. I want to stay here with you." The words hang in the air between them. Not romantic love, but something deeper. The love between a woman who helped raise a boy and the man he became. The love between broken people trying to heal. "You can't stay," Margaret says gently. "You have a life to live, a company to run, people depending on you. I want to run it differently. I want to run it like Dad would have." Margaret's expression softens.
Then do that, but do it for yourself, not for me. She starts to leave again, then pauses at the door. For what it's worth, your father would be proud of who you're becoming. The door closes, and Richard is alone with his thoughts and his healing heart. He knows Margaret won't visit him again. This was her goodbye, her final gift to the boy she once loved. But it's enough. Her words, her presence, her forgiveness wrapped in professional distance. It's enough to build a life on. 3 months later, Richard establishes the Thomas Walker Foundation, dedicated to helping working families in crisis. Margaret's name is on the first check, but she returns it with a note, "Give it to someone who needs it more." Richard frames the note and hangs it in his office next to his father's photo, a reminder that some gifts can't be repaid, only passed forward. He never sees Margaret again, but he carries her with him in every kind word, every second chance, every moment of grace he offers to the world.